I remember having a conversation with Dana. I was talking to him and I said, maybe, somebody will buy me a beer back in Portland when I get, when I get home after the show. Fuck, I couldn't walk through the shopping mall after the show. I couldn't without being stopped. From that airing of that show, my life changed.
Welcome back to the Nichols and Dime Show, everybody. I'm your host, Chris Nichols. Today, my guest is Chris Leben, former UFC fighter, bare knuckle boxer. He currently referees and judges in the UFC and founded an MMA gym in San Diego, which he currently oversees and coaches at, called the Training Center San Diego. This was absolutely one of, if not my favorite conversation to date. And it's not just because he's a well-known UFC legend, which is an organization I'm a huge fan of and follow religiously, but mostly because of the realness and genuine nature of this conversation. Of course, we talk about the things that he's known for in the spotlight, like being on the first season ever of The Ultimate Fighter, and his UFC career and bare knuckle boxing career. But what I got most out of from this conversation was digging into who Chris is, understanding his motivation, his mindset, the resilience that he's demonstrated through so many tough points in his life. He has a wild story. And we talk about the hard things. We talk about substance abuse issues that he's experienced. We talk about the broken family that he comes from, legal issues, health issues, and so forth. So I got so much out of this conversation. I'm so thankful and honored to have had Chris on the show and to have had this conversation with him. I appreciate his realness here. He's very aware of who he was at one point and who he is today and the evolution that he's gone through to be this person today and give back in the ways that he is. I found this conversation very inspiring, going through his story and then tying it into the entrepreneurship angle I take on the Nichols and Dime Show with his very impressive gym, which we recorded this podcast in. I really think you guys are going to get a lot out of this conversation. I hope you enjoy it. I can't wait to hear what you think. Please enjoy. Chris Leben, what's going on?
Not much, man. Glad to be here.
Man, thanks so much for having me. What an honor to have you on the Nichols and Dime Show.
Right on. Thank you.
So we're here at the Training Center, which is your MMA gym here in San Diego.
Yes.
Incredible facility you've got going.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. How long have you had this spot for?
November was 2 years.
Okay.
November's 2 years. So a little bit, yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I'm excited. I want to get into that later on because this podcast is focused on entrepreneurship.
Okay.
And so, I want to talk about what you're doing to give back to the MMA community, from your whole career in UFC, MMA, bare knuckle, everything you've done, right? But we obviously want to talk about your life. You've had a pretty wild life in all ways considered, huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Ups and downs, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Man, well, I've got a ton of questions for you. I'm sure so many people do, but I do like to keep these conversational instead of an interview, just to let people get to know you in a different kind of way than maybe they're used to seeing on TV. But I think the best place to start would be with your UFC career, right?
Okay.
Which is really what, was how you got your fame, right? And you were in the UFC early on. So you were on the very first season of The Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah.
And I was just watching that the other night, and it was so funny seeing Dana White looking all skinny and young in that.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute. I think it was, I think we're coming up on 20 years.
Yeah, 2005.
We hit 19. We should be coming up on 20 years here in another 6 or 8 months.
That's so crazy, man. And that's actually really what I want to get your perspective on to start.
Sure. Is
how far along the UFC has come, right? You were in it early on. Did you see at that time the UFC becoming this mainstream ever, or were you kind of like, this is always going to be small or whatever?
When I got in it, I didn't see it obviously as early on.
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago, it was just when it was. I mean, the UFC had been around since '94, and I remember watching it since then. I remember watching UFC 1, 2, 3. All my friends getting together. In the dark years when they weren't on pay-per-view, finding the videos. So, it was my dream to be in the UFC back then. That was my goal from the day I stepped into the gym.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course with The Ultimate Fighter, Spike TV, bringing that into, the average American household. This thing that I already thought that was big in my world, but certainly wasn't, they weren't talking about it on ESPN or,
Right.
That was not mainstream. For sure wasn't mainstream. It became mainstream almost overnight with the airing of that first season. I remember having a conversation with Dana. I remember Dana telling this story where, he said, I was talking to him and I said, maybe, somebody will buy me a beer back in Portland when I get, when I get home after the show. Fuck, I couldn't walk through the shopping mall after the show. I couldn't without being stopped. I couldn't, my like from that airing of that show, my life changed. Yeah.
Wow.
Some positive, some not so positive, but it changed for sure. It changed for sure. Yeah.
And I want to ask about that reaction, the positive and maybe not so positive. Because obviously, if you're on the show, people are going to recognize you. You're on your way to becoming a professional fighter on the biggest stage. But you had a unique reputation on that series, right?
Yeah. I had, I had some struggles. I was probably I was definitely drinking a little too much on that show, getting a little too wild, and it's actually funny when it comes to the drinking part, because where I grew up and my family and everything, like I didn't really, up until that point, ever think of myself as having any sort of issue or being outside the normal, like getting drunk, falling down, peeing on each other. That's just shit we did,
a thing in your neighborhood in Portland, or a thing within your family?
My group of friends, and my family wasn't much better. The difference is my friends peed on each other, my family peed on themselves. That's really the only difference there. But yeah, so I realized, because, I remember they'd have those interviews where they'd bring people in, and then a lot of the guys are like, well, what is wrong with Chris? He's got the biggest fight of his life and he's getting loaded the night before. And I'm like, and then the whole thing with Bobby Southworth, and I'm bawling and punching through the window and the door. And, that's when I realized, what, maybe I'll, I should take a look at this. Maybe I should try some controlled drinking. Anybody that's ever dealt with alcohol knows how well that works out.
Right. Yeah. As opposed to just cutting it out completely.
Yeah.
And that occurred to you during the filming of
the
that?
The airing. Because, like, listen, if I can't remember, it didn't happen.
Right.
But you got somebody following you around with the camera 24/7, and then you're forced to relive those moments, and you can't rewrite the history in your head. A lot of us are pretty good at making up excuses and kind of rewriting what happened when we were drunk the night before.
For sure, yeah.
But when it's on video, it's fucking on video.
Man.
You know what I'm saying? So
did that occur to you? Like, did you ever have an experience before where you were being followed around by a camera that much?
No, never. No, not before that. I had no idea. And one thing I learned, from that show, because immediately on that show, there's a camera in your face 24/7. You almost forget that it's there. You get so used to those guys being in the background that you're just being normal,
Right.
That's one thing that's changed. I know now, if there's a camera there,
it's gonna be
that filter's on.
So that was your first experience with that level of coverage, was just all in, and you were a kid. I mean, you were in your mid-20s, right? Early 20s.
Early 20s, yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy. So when that aired, like, how do you describe that feedback you got in public? Like, what was the ratio of people who were excited to see you and had good perception of you versus
everybody that approached me was excited to see me and loved me, because I started the UFC because of that show with a very polarized audience. They're like, either you loved me or you hated me. It was one of the two, there was a lot of wild people out there that started messaging me saying, "Oh, you're just like me," and you know what I mean, da da da.
They saw potential in you, perhaps with, or they could relate to you rather.
They could relate a little bit, yeah. So it's interesting, and over the years, I almost feel like a lot of my fans, because have kind of grown with me, if that makes sense.
That's cool.
The changes and the progression, as that's the idea, right? We never stop growing. As we get older, we continue to progress, and hopefully, emotionally and spiritually, and evolve.
Mm-hmm. That's something I want to get back to a little later when we come to the training center and what's motivating you to do this and give back, right? But just on this topic, how would you describe what was going through your mind with the idea of having this opportunity to compete on the biggest stage in fighting and still kind of, from the outside, not taking it seriously, even though you were taking it seriously? You showed up, you worked your ass off, because, we all have stories from sports where there's that one guy on the team who could go out the night before and just get obliterated and somehow still show up and perform. That seemed like that was you.
That was me. That was me for sure. I remember there was a run on that first season of The Ultimate Fighter, and I think, I don't know, maybe Forrest finished it, or I was the only one that finished that run, and I drank a bottle of liquor the night before. Everybody was kind of blown away, but I never saved anything for the swim back, if that makes sense. Where the way I grew up and where I came from, I mean, that was it. That was my one. I was rough around the edges. I think a lot of it, you can only say you can only blame it on other people till a certain age,
Yeah.
But, a lot of it was just my environment, coming in. I was still so young, and then, work ethic was never ever an issue with me. Never ever. I never missed practice.
Yeah.
Pretty hungover, but I never missed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I would be there. I would show up. I'd show up. Sometimes they'd send me home. They're still drunk, but that has happened. But I think that's just one thing that I don't know. Maybe I'm like that old guy now. I feel like a lot of people are missing. Like where is these guys' work ethic? If you have a dream and you want something, grind.
Yeah.
Grind. You have to. And with the skill set that I was given, even then I knew, probably going back to college wasn't the answer for me. Like all my eggs were in one basket.
Yeah.
So, I was gonna do what I had to do.
So you felt you're back against the wall too, from an early age, with just where you were. And
I think there was a lot of anger in me and a lot of spite in me. A lot of teachers and people in my upbringing that really thought I was going to amount to nothing, and there was a lot of fuck you in my, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to be somebody. I'm going to be something, especially in my early 20s. That was, I've said this before, but spite can be very motivating. It can really, if you turn it the right way and use it to drive, it'll push you. It'll drive you.
Yeah. And where did that come from? I know you grew up without your father, right?
Yeah.
Was that a huge factor in making you that way?
I mean, among other things, yeah.
What other things?
I grew up without my father. Mom did her best, but she had her own set of substance issues and emotional issues, and my older brother was a fucking asshole. So he used to beat me up, and he made me pretty tough. We were poor. We didn't have a lot. We never lived in the best neighborhood. So the neighborhood was rough too.
Yeah.
I was hanging out with the wrong people, you know. My mom was hanging out with the wrong people, so they were over at the house too, you know, and that was the lifestyle that I was brought up in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then because of that environment, did you stand out as kind of more of a wild card bad kid at school, or
honestly at home, like, you know, compared to my brother and stuff, I was much better. I wasn't stealing cars. I graduated high school, and you know, I wasn't doing crystal meth and other things, you know, really just alcohol and, you know, your various mushrooms and stuff that you do when you're a kid. But I never went down that. I luckily at the early age didn't, you know, my brother was probably 15, you know, 16 when he started going down that road, and I didn't follow him and my mom down that road. You know, luckily after high school, you know, luckily I found training before it was too late. I think I'm certain that you know, the high school wrestling is the only reason I graduated.
Really?
You know, that the camaraderie and being part of the team, and you had to have a passing GPA to wrestle. You know, so if it wasn't for that, I would have had no use for high school at all. But I love to compete. I love to be part of a team. Even you know, even through high school and stuff. You know, in middle school I was boxing. Don't know why. None of my friends did. I just would catch the bus across town to the public rec center. You know, train boxing. You know, a few days a week, and it was just something that was in me. And a lot of my friends from growing up will remind me, like, even in middle school, you know, you were like, this is what I want to do. Like, and I don't really know where it came from. All I can say is I'm lucky enough to have known what I wanted to do. Yeah. From a very young age.
Why fighting?
Well, you know, I have some learning disabilities, and I really didn't learn how to read or write till after high school. So I was picked on quite a bit, you know, in school, and you know, made fun of also. And I think you know, kind of back then with some of the people I was around, kids aren't nice to each other, man.
No.
Kids are fucking assholes, you know, and you know, I learned it's either sink or swim, you know. And I like competition. Yeah. I do. I didn't know it, but the feeling of beating somebody, winning in a fist fight, there's not much that's more raw than that.
Right.
You know, overcoming somebody that trained their hardest to beat you and then you beat them. It's an amazing feeling. You know, you know, it's also productive in the way, you know, it also, martial arts also, I mean, the martial arts and my coaches, you know, are the men that made me who I am today. You know, I learned how to control that anger and everything else. The gym became my counseling, my psychology, my, you know, my social, my psychological medication, if you will, you know.
We hear this a lot.
If you're stressed out and you've got all this anxiety and stuff and you're ready to punch somebody in the face, go do 10 rounds on the heavy bag. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? You'll fix that. You'll fix that. You know, and then also, I think it kept me out of a lot of trouble because I'd be so exhausted, you know, because I wrestled year round in high school. I went to, you know, USA, I went to club wrestling, you know, and I was boxing in middle school. And then after high school, once I found fighting, it was it every day. Wow. You know, at least most days I was, it's not really true. I still went out a lot, but I was so exhausted, you know, I think it kept me out of a lot of trouble.
That's cool.
Yeah, and it gave me a goal, something to strive for. So I couldn't fuck up too bad.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because I wanted to do this. I wanted to compete. I wanted to fight, which meant, you know, couldn't end up in jail, you know? And I couldn't, you know, there were certain, you know, I didn't want to go too hard.
Yeah.
And I know when people look back, they see the first season Ultimate Fighter, and trust me, it could have been worse.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I wanted to ask again, though, how did you make sense of the broken family environment when you were growing up, right? Because my understanding is you did meet your father, right?
Yeah.
When you were in your 20s.
Yeah.
How did you understand why he wasn't around, why things were the way they were?
Well, growing up, I remember always just telling people, if I see my dad, I'm going to punch him in the face.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And then...
kind of like the Eminem story.
It was actually the filming of the first Ultimate Fighter. One of my best friends, Ed Herman, was also trying out for the show. And my brother had overdosed or something, so he went to stay with my dad. So somehow they had found each other. And my dad called me. He got my number somehow. He called me. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm looking out the window, or I'm looking at the Mandalay Bay and, you know, the different hotels."
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, you looking at a magazine?" I said, "No, I'm looking out my window of my hotel." And he's like, "Oh, I live in Vegas." So I met him at the bar at the MGM.
Wow.
That was the first time I met him. Eddie was there. Eddie was with me. You know, we hung out. We had a beer.
Mm-hmm.
He borrowed $100 at Herman.
Okay.
He borrowed $100 from me, and then he left.
Oh, wow.
You know, but as you get older, you know, I realized that there's two sides to every coin.
Yeah.
You know, and I had only heard my mother's side of the story. Now, albeit he had, you know, drug issues among other things, so did she. You know, they were both very damaged individuals. You know.
Yeah.
So, you know, as life went on, you know, I saw him a few more times, and I was always very nice to him, and, you know, tried to, you know, because I knew he was going to die eventually, you know, and, you know, he did pass. And when he did, he I would like to think, felt he had some sort of a relationship with his son. Now, he wasn't there for me to develop. He missed the bus on all that, but there's no need for me to tell him that. I think deep down inside, he knows it. At least he knew who I was.
Yeah.
He had my phone number. He could call me, you know. And for my situation, my case, that, you know, that was the best answer, man. That was you know.
Yeah. No, I can't imagine. I mean, that impact, even just getting that bit of closure, like you get to talk to him, even if it's a little small relationship, it's something better. So did that give you a lot more peace, at least going forward, after you were able to connect with him that way?
I think what gave me peace is realizing when I came to realize that everybody's broken. Everybody has childhood trauma. Everybody has a fucked up past.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like people tell you, you know, if somebody's having a bad day, you don't listen. Somebody bitches you out. They might have, you don't know how their day is going. You know, I didn't know how his life went.
Yeah.
Didn't know how my mom's life went before I was here. And I realized, they didn't go the best. They brought kids into the world with a lot of baggage that they already had, you know? So once you realize that, then you go, you know what? With the tools they were given, I think they did the best they could. Now, compared to 99% of the population out here, that looks shitty. But it is what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a mature perspective, and it is true across the board, the understanding that everyone's broken and people have some sort of trauma, different levels of it, right? But, you know, not holding this resentment because they're just people at the end of the day.
Yeah. They're as damaged as, you know, me or you or anybody else, you know? So,
Yeah. Yeah, man. Well, thanks for talking about that stuff. But going back to coming out of the Ultimate Fighter and then into your actual UFC career, so you started off pretty hot, right? You won your first few fights.
Yeah.
And I can imagine your confidence was probably pretty high as you were on that run.
Yeah.
And then you had the Anderson Silva fight, right?
Yeah.
That was your first loss in the UFC.
Yeah.
And it was not an easy loss, right? It was a knockout.
Yeah.
What happened to your mindset from a psychology standpoint, confidence standpoint during that time when you were on this run and then you experienced that loss?
Well, I was pissed. I was really bummed out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was extremely hard. We had a game plan. My coach, my coach Matt Hume at the time, was the one fight he ever told me not to take because he had worked in Japan and we had seen Anderson fight plenty, knew who he was before they brought him over. We had a game plan. I didn't listen to it. Obviously, nobody knew Anderson was going to be the GOAT. You know, when I fought him, I was the first guy in the UFC to fight him. You know what I mean?
Oh, really?
So, yeah, I was his first fight in the UFC.
Oh, wow.
And then he beat everybody after that. And every time he beat somebody, I went, yes.
Yeah, right.
Right now, people don't have to think I suck so bad, you know. You know, but you know, outside, I remember I called Dana and I said, like, get me in there immediately. I think I fought 7.5 weeks later.
Wow.
I fought and won.
So you were still charged up to go and redeem yourself.
Yeah, I wanted to get right back on the winning side of things.
Okay.
You know, however, I had to change a lot about my style. So then after that, I ended up losing 2 fights straight because I had to change a lot. All I ever did was go straight forward, you know, and just tank forward and land shots on guys. And that worked. That'll be 99% of people. But there's 1% that you can't come straight at Anderson Silva.
Yeah.
Can't do it. That's not how you fight him. You know, so I had to take 1 step backwards, technically speaking, to take 2 steps forward. I had to really go back and rework some things and change some things, and I think I did that.
Yeah,
I did that. Yeah, I mean, listen, it's like I always tell people: every fight, whether you win or lose, you know, is you know what did we do good? What didn't work? What needs improvement?
Yeah.
You know, every time. And I mean, that's just the way we treated it, you know?
Yeah.
We went, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. Where'd you fuck up? You know?
Yeah. I mean, that's certainly the professional athlete mindset, the ideal mindset to have in being resilient and in sports in general. But, you know, like you do hear this talk a lot about fighters who experience a bad knockout, right? And then they're never the same again.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to get back on the horse, man.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen it. I've seen people that, you know, they can't get over it. I mean, I don't know, whatever you got to do to, because here's the thing. Once you know, you can't unknow.
Yeah.
There's something about being young and dumb and just having total blind faith in yourself, you know, and I definitely had that going. So maybe from my style, it didn't look to some people though I was more calculated, but I was. I definitely became more calculated in my approach to my opponents. I became more committed to my game plan for my opponents. You know, and you know, after, you know, coming back and winning, you know, and you go, okay, you know, lesson learned. Lesson learned. Let's keep moving forward.
Yeah. And so that you gained that learning or that development after that fight. You just took a different approach of how to of how to come back and fix some of the things that in a more technical way, right?
Yeah.
And then, let's go to the end of your time in the UFC with 2013. That was your last fight.
Okay.
Right? So it, and it was things started to go downhill at the end.
Sure.
Fair to say?
Yeah. Yeah.
What changed with you and your mind at that point then, leading up to your last fight when you retired? How were you feeling about the career overall and just how you were doing?
So my last 3 or 4 fights in the UFC, honestly, I didn't want to be there. I was going through I had a fucked up relationship. My drinking, and everything else was way out of control. And, I'd been training every day for well over a decade.
Wow.
And I was mentally just shot. I was mentally shot those last few fights, and
he caught up to you.
It caught up to me. Yeah. That's why my last fight in the UFC, I quit on the stool. I didn't get beat. I didn't get choked out. The crippler, the guy that, would die before he'd quit.
Right.
23 UFC fights, I never tapped out.
Wow.
Never tapped out in any fight ever. But that was kind of what I prided myself on. And then going into the second or third round of that last fight, I was like, you know what, fuck it. I've done enough.
Yeah.
I've made my money. I just don't want to do this, And I remember my coach was like, what are you doing? And I just was like, I was out.
Yeah.
I was out. I was burnt. I just wanted to get back to my hotel room, get some beers in me, and get rid of the anxiety that I had. Yeah.
It was just unbearable in that moment during the fight.
Yeah.
Do you look back? Do you wish you had at least finished that fight, or do you accept it for how it went down?
Yeah, wishing don't do us no good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I ultimately ended up getting sober.
Yeah.
After my UFC career, I was out for a few years. I got sober, and then I fell in love with training again. And I started beating up all the 20-year-olds in the gym.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a short version of the story. That's about the time that Bare Knuckle called me.
Right. Okay. So there was that 5-year period in between UFC and Bare Knuckle.
Yeah.
Right. And so could you just give us a little bit more of a timeline about
that 5-year gap?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, didn't you go to Hawaii too at this point?
No, I was in Hawaii. I moved here. I was here in San Diego for my last 2 fights. Yeah, after that last fight in the UFC, shortly after that, my wife left me, and everything went bananas. I spent a good deal of time downtown on vacation. Got out, had nothing, had a bunch of tax debt, and shit was not good. Shit was not good. I was coaching at another gym here in San Diego, barely making enough to survive, and then I got another DUI, and the court decided that the court and I decided I should go to these AA meetings. Thank God for that, because I went in on a court card, but I stayed.
Yeah,
I stayed once my at first I didn't want to be there and everything else, but then I started to see these other people around me and how their lives were going, and hear their stories of what they'd been through and what they'd overcome, and a lot of them been through a lot worse than me. So I thought, well, maybe it is possible, So I did that, and was successful. I mean, I'm here now.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. I got a pretty cool story to tell, and hopefully, I can reach a hand out to somebody else.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you know, that I do have bigger general questions about just how you have come back from each of these setbacks. You've had some major ones, some gnarly ones, but you are obviously here today doing.
Can't kill me.
Yeah, I mean, it's super inspiring, man. And
Thank you.
you know, I mean, I'll just ask you now, what is your toolbox to have come back from each of these, you know, things have happened in your life that would probably end a lot of people, right? Whether it's an issue legally or with substance abuse or getting knocked out in a fight with millions of people watching. I mean, how do you describe the way you come back, your resilience?
Yeah. Well, in the most recent one, I had 4 organ failure and I was on a respirator for a month.
Jeez, man.
I think they gave me like a 1 in 500 chance of living.
No way.
Know? Yeah. I had my heart shut down, my liver, kidneys shut down. Got COVID real bad.
Oh man.
Real bad. Yeah. I spent over a month in the hospital.
Wow.
You know, in induced a coma. Yeah, that was rough too.
Yeah. Jeez, man.
You know, during that one, you know, people, you know, my friends, like, we should make these shirts that says Leben never taps, you know, and stuff. And I'm like, listen, man, I did tap. I don't know how I said my goodbyes to everybody, you know, when they put you into a coma, you know, I made my last calls, you know, and we knew most likely I wasn't coming out.
Oh, wow.
You know, but I was conscious, you know what I mean? And, you know, and I really didn't think a body could come back from as sick as I was, you know, and I think sometimes being strong means surrendering.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You have to surrender sometimes to your situation and accept it for what it is.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Before you can put one foot forward and keep going. Like, denial doesn't work.
Right.
You know what I mean? Sometimes people think, I can't accept this. Like, no. Like no. Like, listen, I fucking lost. Right? I got knocked out. Why did I get knocked out?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's better than me? That doesn't help.
Yeah.
I got knocked out because of something I did. If I ever lost a fight, it was because of something I did. I have to accept that, and I have to figure out what it was and hopefully correct it. And then I got to go back and try again. Mm-hmm. Right? It was my decisions, my will that got me into my drug and alcohol problem. Nobody else's. Mm-hmm. I have to accept that.
Yeah.
You know?
Full ownership.
When I'm in the hospital dying,
yeah,
I have to accept that. It's going to be what it's going to be. Right?
Yeah.
And once you do that, that anxiety goes away. The anxiety from it goes away, you know, and, you know, I have come to believe, because I'm a prove it guy, when I look back at my life, that there's been some fucking divine intervention. Like, there's no other way. There's no other way I should have been able to overcome all these things unless there was an outside force. Because like I said, I didn't do it.
Wow.
I didn't do it. It wasn't me. Something has picked me up. Something has pushed me along. And something keeps helping me out. There are so many times in my life I thought there was no way out. I thought I was fucked.
Yeah.
You know, and it's never been the case.
Yeah.
It's never been the case. I've always ended up, the car straightens itself. I'm back on the road, you know?
Yeah.
And all I do is just keep putting one foot in front of the other and do what I think I'm supposed to do. You know?
Man.
What's next? Okay, great. What's next? Okay, great. What's next? Don't look too far ahead. Accept what's behind. Don't dwell on it. What's next?
Yeah. Wow. Okay, that's such a good transition. Well, to bare knuckle after the 5-year hiatus. But just because of what you said, did this have an impact on your faith or beliefs that you have?
Yeah.
How would you describe that?
It did. I go to church.
Okay.
I never went to church before that. I was always spiritual.
Okay.
You know, you know, and I go to church. Maybe I have different motivations than some.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really care that much about scripture.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really want to debate with you if this is if the Bible is literal or it's metaphorically speaking. Sure. It doesn't fucking matter to me, bro. Mm-hmm. I go to give thanks.
Yeah.
I go because I'm grateful. Mm. And I go because there's something that's been pushing me along. Mm-hmm. And it's not me. And so I am very grateful for that, and I want to keep that connection. I want to strengthen that connection with that higher power.
Yeah.
And that's so that, you know, that's what I do.
That's awesome.
That's what I focus on. I strip all the bullshit out, all the argument out of any sort of out of religious talk, you know?
Yep.
And I say, just listen, get your connection.
Yep.
Get your connection with your higher fucking power. Yeah. You know, for me, that's church. Mm-hmm. If that's not it for you, then fine. But whatever you can connect with, dude, let's go. Mm-hmm. Let's go, because I have found, again, prove it guy, looking through history, I can't tell you too many people that found God in one way or another, their life got worse. Mm. They got spiritual and their life got worse.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So what are we arguing about?
Right.
You know what I mean?
So true, man. Yeah, I love that and agree completely.
Thank you.
Yeah, great way to describe that. And I want to go back to just going to the next thing, right? You talk about that was this mindset of keep moving, keep going to the next thing. And I feel like this applies to getting back into bare knuckle.
Okay.
So you had Bellator basically not let you in, right?
Yeah,
you were
so
because of health stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I get that's my question. Like, what was going through your head to still get back into a gnarly form of fighting? So
after the UFC, when everything was really bad, still, I tried to sign up for Bellator because I really needed money. And I failed my medicals, and I found out my ejection fraction at that time was at like 18%, right?
Yeah. Jeez.
Right. Turns out cocaine is not good for your heart.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. So
who knew?
But here's the crazy thing.
Yeah.
Here's the crazy thing. When you take it away, you take away the drugs and alcohol, your body will heal itself.
Yeah.
You know, so I tell guys all the time in here when people ask me about supplements and what they should be eating and everything else, I say, listen, 90% of it is not what you're eating and what you're taking. 90% of it is what you're not eating and taking.
Wow.
Right? So much going to affect you, so much more cutting the bullshit out than putting anything good in.
For sure.
It's such a bigger part of health.
Yeah.
You know, so for me,
such a good point, man.
So for me, I learned that, man. Listen, there's no supplement that's going to fix your heart if you're drinking every day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you're doing blow. Just nothing. Now, you cut out those two things. You don't need any medication or supplement.
Uh-huh.
You know, that's it.
It's amazing what the body is capable of by itself.
Yeah, it's pretty smart.
Yeah.
It's pretty smart. We just got to not poison it.
Right.
You know, whether we're poisoning it with food, substances, or even our mental, I think, can poison our body because our brain and body are certainly connected.
Right. And on that note, I wanted to ask you this because I think a lot of people wonder what it's like. What physical condition are you in as a retired fighter with a career as long and as grueling as you've had? How do you feel today? How does your body feel? What hurts?
Well, before we started filming, I think I told you, I said, I was complaining about how I hurt, you know, and I said, well, you know what the thing is? The day I'm going to be bummed out, the day I wake up and nothing hurts.
Yeah.
because I'm going to be dead.
Right.
You know, so I know I'm alive.
Yeah.
I know I'm alive, and I do something every day. I train every day. You know, sometimes after even a 3-day weekend and I start feeling too good, I don't like that. I like to have aches and pains. I like to be sore.
Yeah.
Because I know that I'm using it. I want to put all the miles on this car before I turn it in. You know what I'm saying? When I go in the ground, I want this body to be worn out. You know, I'm trying to use it as much as possible. Don't get me wrong. I focus more and more as I get older on keeping the car on the road.
Right.
It's got to stay on the road though.
Right,
So within reason, you know, and that's a bounce. That's a bounce that I've really been bad at my entire life, and I'm really trying to work on is listening to my body and not just pushing through. Because during my fighting career, oh, your knee hurts, so what?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Your elbows hurt, great.
Right.
Are we going to cancel the fight? No.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So what do? You push through.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's it.
You know, and I'm at a different point in my life now.
Yeah.
Where maybe it's like my financial well-being doesn't depend on me performing, you know. I can rest. Yeah. This is me talking to myself, by the way.
No,
I can rest.
I can tell. I like it. Yeah.
I don't. I very rarely do.
Yeah.
I very rarely do. But I'm working on that now. Yeah.
And that's actually a good transition then to what you're doing here with the training center.
Okay.
So you had about 2 years or so in bare knuckle, right?
Yep.
2020, you stopped. I imagine that was largely due to COVID. Things kind of just all shut down, or did you retire before that?
I had one more fight after COVID.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because I remember I was in the hospital for staph.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
And I had a fight lined up that fell through because of COVID. Yeah, and then I had one last fight. Yeah. Might have been just, maybe, I can't remember.
Yeah.
But
I guess the main question I'm interested in is, did you know you were done when you were done?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I told him. I was 40 years old. I'm 43 now. And, you know, I told Nate, he's the guy that kind of runs everything for BKFC. I'm like, listen, man, this is it, you know? And I said, don't worry, I'm not going to try to come back. Like, last fight, they're like, it's your last fight, you know, you can pick whoever you want, you know? You know, so I've only been able to pick two opponents. One of them was Vanderlei Silva.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
And the other one was this tough kid.
Yep.
You know, he undefeated. I went up a weight class, fought him at 205. He's a slugger, you know, slugger, and that's my last fight of my career was exactly what I wanted it to be. It was a slugfest, you know. He knocked my tooth out. You know, I ended up winning. Quentin Henry.
That's right.
Sorry, it took me a second to pull that name up. That's what happens when you get hit in the head
right.
your whole life, guys. Tough kid, though. Look him up. And I think he's done well. I don't know if he's lost since me. After he had that one loss, and he went on to beat a bunch of guys. You know, and I was like, that was the perfect Chris Leben fight. You know, but I do want to share this. My fight before that was a 5-round war against a guy named Dakota Cochran.
Okay.
So in bare knuckle, I had 3 first-round KOs, and I had 1 loss. My fight before that, the fight that I lost, is probably the proudest fight I've ever had in my entire life. Because if anybody knows who Dakota Cochran is, the guy hits like a fucking truck.
Yeah.
And he shattered my orbital real early in the fight. First round.
Yeah. It's terrible.
And the fight was a bloodbath. I fought him till the bitter end. You know, judges gave it to him. That's fine.
Yep.
But I didn't quit on my stool. You know, first round I was seeing 3 of my opponent. You know, and that let me know that guy that quit that last fight in his UFC career, that wasn't me.
Yeah.
That was the substances that I was putting in my body. That was me poisoning my soul.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The Chris Leben that fought that fight where with a broken orbital.
Yeah.
They had 32 stitches here, like 2,400 here. They had to sew my nose back on. That painting right there, my girlfriend painted it. It's actually a picture of me after that fight.
Oh, gee.
Yeah.
Oh, I saw that yesterday. I was wondering.
Yeah, she painted that for Christmas for me. What a sweetheart.
What a nice Christmas gift.
Yeah.
What?
But yeah, that's the Chris Leben I want to be remembered as.
Yeah.
Win or lose.
Yeah.
This is how this guy fights.
Well, you've done an amazing job at giving out that message so far, man. And, you guys can hear in the background, there's some noise. This is his gym. This is Chris's gym, the training center.
We're getting some people here now, so it's getting close to close to time. But if it's not bugging you, we keep going a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But I just wanted to ask you about what motivated you to start this gym, to open this gym. Like, was it you want to give back to the community after all the stuff you've been through? And
listen, it's in my opinion. Okay, like most people, you're a baby, you go to school, you live with your parents, eventually you move out, you go to college, then you start your own family. It's just a general progression of life. Right? Well, I trained under these wonderful people, amazing people and their systems. I've been blessed to have these great coaches, and then I went on to teach at a couple other gyms for many years. And then there became a time when it was like, okay, it's time for me to open up my own place, start my own lineage. And for me, that's what this is about. Yeah. That's what this is about. And, the gym is more, the gym, like I said earlier, the gym kind of saved me. It kept me on the right track. We got a lot of people in here got problems. Yeah. A lot of these people in here got problems. Some of them are a little more special case to my heart than others. But for some reason, this sport, we attract the special ones. Right. We attract the real special ones. Yep. And this is their medicine, and hopefully I try to sneak my message in a little bit, sneak it into them a little bit, yeah.
I love that. So that's the motivation right there.
That's it.
That's amazing.
That's it.
Whether
they go on to fight or, Dean just won the amateur title here weekend before last. Jordan's a pro fighter. A lot of these guys haven't ever fought. But that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. There's something different in martial arts for everybody, right? And if it improves their mental health and their standard of living, then we're successful.
That's awesome, man.
And I got to keep the lights on.
Yeah, for sure.
And I got to keep the lights on.
Yeah. What is your next big goal with everything you're doing now and to continue the impact you've had? Well,
I'm refereeing and judging a lot. I've been doing a lot of judging and a lot of refereeing here in California. I recently got my license under Nevada, so I've been doing judging a lot of the UFC Fight Night cards.
It's amazing.
And I want to continue to work my way up as a referee and a judge. I judged the UFC 298 that was here in California, a month ago, and I'm hoping, eventually I'll be reffing that, Yeah. And obviously I want to continue to grow my gym. It's really a labor of love and try to leave the world a better place than I found it. Right. As corny as that sounds, try to help some people out. Maybe put it this way. I got a lot of karma points I got to make up for the first 25 years of my first 30 years of my life. You know, I'm 43 now, and I got a lot to pay even before I get to even. I got a lot more to give back. Man. So, you know, that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, I'm just amazing self-awareness and perspective you have to even say that, acknowledge it like that, and your journey really is inspiring, man. So
thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing what you're doing, and you know, helping all these guys out, right? Helping them with their lives, their journey, and I mean, I just in my learning of you over the years, it's inspiring to me how you've bounced back every time, and just how the amazing things you're doing right now.
Thank you.
Absolutely, man. Well, Chris, thanks so much. It's an honor to have you on the show.
That was a great one. That was a great podcast. Thank you so much for having me. Talk soon.
Oh yeah, absolutely, Chris. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Nichols and Dimes Show. Please hit the subscribe button on YouTube and follow my Instagram page at Nichols and Dimes. The podcast Instagram page is at Nichols and Dimes Show. And please like any of the videos you come across on either platform and leave a comment, leave feedback. It helps me to improve and innovate and to continue to scale and bring more interesting guests to the Nichols and Dimes Show. Thank you all for the support, and we'll see you next time.